Fantastic. Thank you, man. Good morning, everybody. And I don't know what the cut-off is for this, but Happy New Year. I think I'm going to probably keep doing it till March. So I hope the year is a good one. I hope it treats everybody well. So as you know, my name's Dean. I'm the National Account Manager for Paymentshield, looking after the relationship with you guys. Thank you for joining me. And if you're watching the recording, again, hopefully you've got my contact details. But if you've got any questions and you can't find me, ask Mohan and he'll point you in the right direction. But if you do need anything clarified or you want any more help after this webinar, please don't hesitate to get in touch with myself. And I'll run through some of the names of the rest of the team that work with me looking after Julian Harris as well. So now some of you guys may have joined me before, but what I'm going to do is just do a bit of a recap with some of the statistics because they have changed slightly since the last time we spoke. But I just want to go through these statistics just to put us back in a position where we know where we've refreshed our knowledge effectively. But then I'm going to take it a little bit of a step further and hopefully give you some ideas as how we can combat the levels of GI and the knowledge of GI that people out in the great wide world actually have. So you may or may not remember the first statistic I threw at everybody last time was 8 out of 10 clients that you speak to will buy their buildings and contents somewhere else, which is still a little bit disappointing. That hasn't changed, by the way. That statistic is exactly the same as it was last time we spoke. This was updated in September 24. Now, there's a number of reasons behind that, and hopefully we can help combat those as we work through this webinar today anyway. But I definitely believe that one of the main reasons that happens is either we don't ask the question, we're afraid to ask the question because our knowledge isn't what it should be, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because that's our fault, not your fault. And the other reason is I think it's quite easy to skirt around the GI question. And that's maybe something we can work on as we go forward, not necessarily from an advisor point of view, but we need to try and get the client to understand what the pitfalls are if they decide to go and buy from somewhere else. The next statistic I want to throw in, again, which has just been updated, is over 1 in 5 claims for buildings and contents are still being declined, which is still a very big number. And again, the next thing we're going to do is a recap of the reasons behind that. Now, if you've heard this before, I do apologise, but I think it's important that we just skip over them very, very quickly. But we're going to come on to them in a bit more detail as we go through this webinar anyway. So the first one I always like to talk about is underinsurance. Now, as time goes on and as things move forward, this is becoming a greater problem. We all know now that the cost of living and the price of everything is rapidly increasing. And that includes things that we would be claiming for in our insurance, not just built and contents insurance, but car insurance. I don't know if anybody's got pet insurance or people have taken their pet to the vet recently, but the costs are absolutely astronomical. And if you haven't got the right level of cover, it can cause you issues. So what can we do to help combat that? Well, the easiest thing I can talk about here, and the thing I will go to straight away, is something called blanket cover. Okay, so with Paymentshield and the other providers that are working in our space, within the intermediary space, tend to offer what is called blanket cover. And we have levels of insurance for buildings, for example. We offer £1 million worth of cover. Some insurers will offer unlimited within your space. Be careful when we see the word unlimited when we're looking at price comparison sites, because unlimited doesn't always mean unlimited when you're buying online. But the providers that you guys work with, if they offer unlimited, it pretty much means unlimited. We put a figure of £1 million, and the reason we've gone for £1 million is because if you need more than £1 million rebuild cost, then probably when we're looking at our contents cover of 75 or 100,000, and I'm sorry to jump from buildings to contents in one sentence there, but if we look at our cover of 75 or 100,000 and your property is going to cost more than £1 million to rebuild, I would probably suggest that that maximum of 100,000 isn't going to be a sufficient number to cover everything in your property. So we offer £1 million. Now, I must stress, and again, you may already know this, that although the level is £1 million, we don't charge your client for £1 million worth of insurance. We do some research in the background, we do some checks, and if the average claim, for example, is £250,000 for a property in that postcode with that many bedrooms, etc., that's what we will charge your client. Okay, so if they only need £250,000 to rebuild their property, that's what they're going to be charged, not for £1 million worth of cover. They will just have £1 million worth of cover. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please feel free to come off mute, and I'm happy to go over that as well if you want to. This also applies to contents insurance. One of my favorite statistics, which normally does get a bit of a discussion going, is the average value of a couple's wardrobe at this moment in time is around about £20,000. And when we look at what you get offered from a price comparison site for your contents insurance, you will see why that could cause you issues. The next thing that is becoming more of an issue is accidental damage cover. I'll skip back to high excesses in a moment, but no accidental damage cover is now causing more and more of an issue. And in fact, the reason I've skipped over high excesses to go to this one now, it's very, very quickly catching up. In fact, it's now our main claim for accidental damage. 35% of claims are now accidental damage, and that can be either buildings or contents. Now, the issue here is when you add accidental damage cover to your premium, I'm sure you can all imagine why, but the premiums will increase. And unless there's somebody like you guys that can explain to the client why they should do that by using that 35% statistic, if you don't explain that to somebody and people aren't aware of it, if it's costing them more money, a lot of the time they're not taking that cover and they're just taking it back off again, which means that 35% of the time they're unable to claim, which isn't where we want clients to be. Let me skip back now to the high excesses. It's not just excesses are high, it's that if you're buying online, often you will find that excesses get stacked. So you'll get a compulsory excess and you'll get a voluntary excess added together to give you your total excess. Now, I've just mentioned accidental damage cover, and the average claim for contents on AD would be around about £650. If you've got a £500 excess, which is kind of where the defaults get set, you're going to be able to claim for £150 maximum. Now, if you've got a level of underinsurance, that could really damage the ability for you to put a claim in because of that level of excess. And it's something that clients don't necessarily understand. But if you reduce those excesses down, you find that the premiums go up. And without somebody explaining the science behind that and the reasons behind that, you could find yourself in a little bit of problem. And the last one on this list, and I know I'm flying through this, but like I say, if you've got any questions, don't be afraid to come off mute and ask me. The next one and the final one is probably my favorite. Possession cover, personal possessions cover. This covers items in and away from the home, and in some cases, just in the home. It also means specified items and non-specified items. What do I mean by that? Well, to specify an item with Paymentshield and with most of your other providers, you will have a threshold that you need to go above. In Paymentshield's case, it's £2,500 is roughly where we sit for our thresholds. So if you've got a diamond ring that's worth more than £2,500, you would need to specify it. If it's below 2.5, you can actually just go for non-specified personal possessions cover. I am going to ask a question, and I don't expect anyone to come back and answer because we're all on mute. But at this moment in time, the take up for personal possessions cover is roughly, well, so roughly what would you think it would be? And again, I don't expect you to answer, but if you want to put it in the comments, please do. But at this moment in time, it's around about 14%. So only 14% of policies sold by advisors with Paymentshield have got some level of personal possessions cover. My own belief is that should be almost 100%. Based on the fact that I would imagine almost 100% of your clients, having moved into their new home, will at some point go back outside again. And when they go back outside, they will almost every single time have stuff with them, particularly if it's a family. And when they walk through that front door, the stuff they've got with them may or may not be insured. And we need to make sure that if they want to be able to claim for it, that it's listed on their policy. And we do that under personal possessions cover. But again, when we do that, it means the premiums will increase. And if there's no one there to discuss it with you and give advice, would you pay more for your insurance than the likes of Judi Dench and the Meerkats say you should? And unfortunately, what we're finding is very often people don't. And they're opening themselves to that 23% statistic where they're unable to claim or their claim will be declined. As a whistle stop tour, I hope that all made sense. But if you do get any questions or you think of anything, again, put it in the notes or just come off mute and ask me the question. So my question to you, having just discussed all of those points there, is do your customers need advice? And I think just to put it into more simple terms, I could watch a video online that tells me how to build a table. I could watch it on YouTube or I could watch it on TikTok, whatever that is. But I could watch that video and I could go to my shed and I could build a table. Would it still be standing if I put something on that table? And with my DIY skills, the answer to that, unfortunately, would be an absolute complete and utter no, it wouldn't. It will fall over, it will fail, because I'm not trained as a carpenter. Just watching some basic steps on how to do it isn't really going to help. And I think it's really important that we remember that you guys are qualified to give this kind of advice. And it doesn't matter how many free pizzas you get or how many nights at the cinema you get. As an average man in the street, you don't really understand what you're doing when you're buying any kind of insurance policy unless someone's told you. And I'll come on to that in a moment as well, if I may. So, is it all about price? Well, I've already said the cost of living is going through the roof. So yes, price is absolutely important. But you'll notice now that even the comparison sites have changed their tack. And it used to be driven price, price, price. Even the comparison sites now are saying the right home insurance tailored to you. That is a tagline that they wouldn't have used a couple of years ago. But even they're buying into the importance of the product and the policy. They're still not going to give you any advice, so the risk still sits with the client. But they're only going to tailor it based on the information that you give them. They're not going to give you any ideas because it's a computer system. It's not designed to do that. That's where you guys come in. There's also something else on that screen that I really like because it plays right into our wheelhouse, is get your free quote. Now, the great news here is we don't do quotes because we're professionals. We make recommendations. So as a client, would rather have a quote like you get from a double glazing salesman, which then increases, or they just don't turn up? Or would you rather have a recommendation from a qualified professional? I know where I'd be sitting. Just as one other thing I always throw in at this point here, I think it's quite interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever checked it, but have you ever Googled cheap parachutes? It's not a question that gets asked for a lot. So if you are on Amazon and you put in cheap parachutes, I don't think anything comes up. So I think it's important how we perceive what we're doing. It's not just about getting the cheapest product, but sometimes you don't really want that cheap parachute. You may want to pay a little bit more for that, just so you've got a little bit of peace of mind when you fall out of a plane. So next question, and again, I don't expect anybody to answer. One thing that advisors say to us continually is we ask too many questions and it takes too long to get a quote. On average, do you know how many questions you would have to answer in order to get a quote with an online provider, with a price comparison site? And again, you're probably scribbling something down at this point, hopefully. The answer is actually 92. You will have to answer 92 questions just to get a basic quote from a comparison site. Now, I think you can imagine that takes a long time. We ask 7 questions in order to get an indicative quote. 7. So why are they asking 90 questions or 85 questions on average more than we need to get a quote? It's because they're farming data. It's as simple as that. They will ask a load of questions, and more importantly, they will make a load of statements that your client potentially will just agree to because you believe that they've done checks. One of my favorites is we believe that your property is more than 400 meters away from open water. Has anybody ever checked? When you buy a property or when you view a property, do you get the little wheel out and wheel it down to the closest river to see how far away you are from a river? I genuinely believe nobody ever does. You might Google it, but it's very hard to get accurate information. And if in fact you are 399 meters away from water and not 400 meters away from water and you flood, you may encounter issues when it comes to claim time. So thankfully, we don't ask that question. A couple of other questions that get asked when you're buying online. One is around alarms. We believe, or does your property have a working burglar alarm? And a lot of time the client will answer that yes, and then they see the premiums increase. So they change it from yes to no. That doesn't work. If you've got an alarm, you have to declare that you've got an alarm. And I can go into the reasons why the premiums go up if you want me to. And again, if you do, just put your hand up and I'm quite happy to discuss that. The other question that they also look at when you're buying online is, do all of your windows have a key operated window lock? So if you've got double glazing, you will say yes to that because all windows tend to have key operated locks. But that's not the question they're asking. The question they're asking is, do you lock your windows? Which is obviously a completely different answer is compared to, can you lock your windows? And you could fall foul if you get that answer wrong. Just this screen here, we're looking at just 3 questions. The first one is, do you need to insure any laptops or bikes valued over £350? Well, as I've said, our threshold is 2,500. So if you're starting at 350, that immediately is going to start driving that premium up because you need to list them. Even if you think you don't want to insure them, if you don't, you're creating problems. So if you've got a laptop worth £375, you need to declare it. So you need to list it here, whether you want to or not. Because if you don't, you are underinsuring yourself knowingly. And then we get back to that original problem. Next question here is, would you like to insure any belongings? So personal possessions. Would you like to insure them anything over £1,000? That's a very low threshold. And again, it's not a choice. If you've got something worth £1,100 that is in the property, you need to declare it. Otherwise, you are knowingly underinsuring yourself. So you can't choose not to. You need to cover it. You need to list it. And then below that, when you can see, would you like to insure any other personal belongings away from the home? So that would be items less than £1,000. And as I said, our threshold is 2,500. And again, when you're leaving the home, if you don't take that cover, you won't be insured. Do you remember I mentioned the wardrobe earlier on in the webinar? The average value of a lady's and gentleman's wardrobe or a couple's wardrobe is £20,000. This is for a 3-bedroom semi. And when we got to the contents part, they came back and offered us between £24,300 and £70,000 worth of cover. And then the figure they use is 48,000. No science behind that. It's just right in the middle. So even if you take 48,000, the average insurance required for a 3-bedroom property, according to Admiral, in some research they did last year, is £55,000. So you are already, even at 48,000, you are underinsuring yourself against the average. That could create problems. This is why I mentioned the blanket cover of 75 or 100,000. Exactly the same with contents as with buildings. If the average is 55,000 for that postcode and that number of bedrooms and a person of that role and that industry, that's how the average is calculated. If it is less than 55,000 or less than 75,000, we will only charge the client for that average, unless they then obviously specify some items, and that will be taken into account. But you don't pay for the full cover. You only pay for what we believe that you need to pay for based on averaging. So you can see the risk doesn't sit with the client. It sits with the insurer, which is where it should sit. So hopefully I've given you some reasons why we should advise GI, but just to cover them off, have your circumstances changed, Mr. Client, since you last took advice about your buildings and contents insurance? You will get 2 answers here: yes, or I've never taken advice. Because things do change every 12 months. You will buy something else. You'll buy a laptop. You'll buy an engagement ring. You'll buy yourself a watch. These things happen in between policy being taken out and renewal. I think it's really important to remember at this point that we don't say, I'd like to give you a quote to see if I can get you a cheaper option for your buildings and contents insurance, because it's not about the price. And the odds are we won't be cheaper because we will be working with the client to get the product right for them. It won't just be an off-the-shelf product. Are your clients underinsured? More importantly, let's not assume that your clients actually have insurance. 6 million properties in the UK have no buildings and contents insurance. So don't be afraid to ask that question. Do you have cover? When did it renew? Can I see a copy of your documents? Because you'll probably need it to supply to your solicitor or to the lender anyway. So you may as well ask the client for them, because we should demonstrate that the right and appropriate cover is in place as per the mortgage agreement. Top right, this is the only policy that is mandatory for your client to take if they're buying a freehold property. And in some cases, they still need it with leasehold as well. It's mandatory. So if they don't buy it from you, as I said right at the start, 8 out of 10 people will be buying it somewhere else. The green tick at the bottom is consumer duty, unforeseeable harm. Your property flooding or burning down is definitely unforeseeable harm. So by having this discussion with your client, you're helping them consider that and therefore helping them avoid that unforeseen harm. And then finally, my absolute favorite is ring fencing your clients. In our industry, two things are very expensive. The first one is getting good staff. And you guys have got that covered. And I know that because you're part of Julian Harris. The next thing that's expensive is attracting clients. It's not easy and it's not cheap. So when you've got them, we need to try and keep them. Bills and contents insurance is a tangible thing that you need to speak to your client about every 12 months because it's a 12-month renewing policy. Now, you can send your client a birthday card, or you can send them a Christmas card. You can send them a quarterly newsletter that they may or may not read. But if you phone them about bills and contents insurance, you do need to have that conversation. And when you do have that conversation about bills and contents insurance, maybe you can do a review for their protection as well. And if they haven't got life or kick or IP, it's the ideal time to start talking about that product. So it's an excuse and a reason to make contact with your client. And by the way, turning a customer into a client isn't quite as easy as you'd think. I don't know if anybody remembers, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember the Abbey National. And they always said back in the day that they're only a client if they've got 5 policies with you. Because if they've only got 4, that means they're going elsewhere to buy the 5th one. And that person they're buying that 5th one from will try and steal the other 4. So you need to make sure they've got at least 5 things with you. Buildings and contents are 2 of those 5. So that really should help you ring fence your clients and turn your customers into clients as well. So that was all fantastic, I hear you say, and it's great to have all that information, but what are we going to do with it? Okay, well, when we're talking to clients, we need to ensure that they understand that this isn't a one-size-fits-all product. It's not as easy as just going online and spend 20 minutes trying to buy it from a price comparison site. Price comparison sites compare price. That's why they're called price comparison sites. They don't actually compare the products, but we can do that. So 3 questions a colleague of mine always asks their advisors. And again, it's very difficult because we're all on mute. But the 3 questions are, first of all, how important is your family home? And if you don't get one of 2 answers there, then maybe they shouldn't be buying the family home. But the first answer is important, or the most common one is very important. So let's take very important as the answer. So if your home is very important to you, how important is it to know that you have the right cover in place? I would imagine on that basis, it would be very important. And then final question is, do you want to know you've got the right cover in place now or when your house has burnt down? And if they say when the house has burnt down, again, I think we've got a problem. So people need to know they've got the right cover in place before any of those unforeseeable harms that we were talking about actually occur. And this is why your advice is absolutely key. And I'm only touching the surface today. If you need any more help with some sales techniques or so points or key selling points, please don't be afraid to get in touch with us. We're more than happy to run through it with you. But most importantly, if we sell it tailored to the client and we ask those extra questions, the business will stick with you longer. And statistically, we can support that. So the more inclusive the policy, the longer it will stay on your book, which means you earn more money, which is great because I'm sure nobody's doing this for a hobby. So when we say ask those questions, The important part is not just the key part and main part of the policy, it's the optional extras. And I don't expect you to be able to read any of this, by the way, because the print is incredibly small. Well, I hope it is, because I can't read it, and unless my eyes have gone. So we have got in our website, in the Advisor Hub, which hopefully you guys will log into regularly, we've got something called the Marketing Toolkit. And in the Marketing Toolkit is a huge amount of information that you can use yourself, or you can print out, or you can email to your client. And you can even order still, in this day and age, you can still order hard copies that you can have in your office that you can hand to your client so they can read it. The one I've sort of snipped up here is the optional extras. And these are the things that help the product stick by getting the client to understand what the optional extras is. And it kind of relates back to those 4 items we talked about right at the start: underinsurance, excesses, personal possessions, and accidental damage. But because time is short today, I'm not going to talk through them all. Let's just do a random spin. Hope you like that, by the way. It's taken ages to get that to work. So, of course, rent protection is the first one that pops up. It does this to me every single time. Now, you may immediately notice that how can you have rent protection on a buildings and contents policy? Well, obviously, in this case, this relates to landlord's cover. So if you were talking to your clients about landlord's insurance, building and contents insurance, rent protection, I feel, is very, very important, particularly with the changes that are going through in legislation as we speak, making it even harder to evict your tenants. If you have a delinquent tenant that isn't paying the rent, you need to get them evicted. The average cost, and I think this was about 4 years ago we had this number, so you can imagine this has probably increased massively since then. The average cost to do that was £16,000, which as a landlord is a huge amount of your profit that you are making on renting out your property, because as we know, profits have been slashed massively because of the way everything works in the rental sector these days. So this policy works out around about 65 pence a day if you take it in conjunction with your buildings and contents insurance. For 65 pence a day, you will get cover on your rent of up to £2,500 a month, and the policy will handle the eviction of your customer or your tenant, which takes all of the headache and stress away. 65 pence a day, and you can avoid being on Channel 5. I think that's money certainly well spent. But again, what you'll find is professional landlords will always have rent protection in place because they understand that those properties are there to make them money. And I'm going to use the phrase amateur landlord or an accidental landlord probably won't see the value. So we need to explain it to them. I would always start with the rent protection discussion before I moved into buildings and contents insurance, because I think it's incredibly important. Let's give it a spin.
For people who've got leasehold properties, they rent leasehold properties. Can you add that to a contents policy?
We don't do contents at the moment for landlord's policy. You would have to think about buildings and contents.
So you wouldn't do it for a leasehold property?
Not at the moment, but we are about to launch something which I don't know who I'm speaking to, but who is that? Phil, yeah?
Yeah.
Hi, Phil. Yeah. We've got something in the pipeline which I can't talk about at the moment because we haven't actually told any of the networks that we're about to do it. But we think we've got an answer to your question anyway. But also we are speaking to insurers at the moment about contents only for landlords.
Okay.
So hopefully we can put that right. There may be a reason to take buildings and contents, but that's getting quite technical and probably for another time, Phil, if that's okay. But if you do want to discuss that, I'm more than happy to pick that up with you offline. So moving on from rent protection, if that's okay, Phil, please drop me an email or give me a call. More than happy to go through all of that with you. No trouble at all. So contents accidental damage is the next one. Again, we've already talked about accidental damage. It's really important that we actually have that discussion with the client about what this means. Now, it may cost you a little bit more, but it will in the long run, should you need to put a claim in, help you out. Just to give you an example, I had a claim myself last year. My wife left the bath running and it soaked through the ceiling, ruined the bathroom. There was water everywhere. It was all my fault because I didn't turn the tap off quick enough, because I should have heard it, obviously, but I'm not going to argue with, because I did absolutely nothing, to be fair. So it kind of is my fault in a way, even though I didn't know the bath was running. But we'll gloss over that. Okay. Now, contents accidental damage, you think, okay, well, that should be buildings accidental damage. And yes, it was. The replastering and the door frames that all warped, that was part of the building's accidental damage. But it also soaked something in the hallway. So we had a nice little unit in the hallway that got absolutely drenched and warped and fell apart effectively. And because of that, we were able to claim on the contents accidental damage. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to replace that unit. So it's really important that even the smallest things get picked up. And then finally, which is probably all we've got time, I'm just going to do the third one here, is home emergency. Going back to a flood in my own circumstance, because I always like to refer back to things that have happened to me, because a lot of stuff has. I had a problem a few years ago where the entire downstairs plumbing system fell apart because the guy that we bought the house off was a builder and he didn't actually weld the pipes together. I gave a stopcock one little tap with a hammer and the whole thing just disintegrated. And we were very quickly underwater downstairs. I'd got home emergency. I phoned the policy holder at the time. I can't remember who we were insured with at the time, but I phoned the insurer, and within an hour, I'd got a plumber in the house trying to help me stop the water from flooding, which was invaluable. It would have been invaluable, but I was holding the stopcock in my hand at the time, so that wasn't going to help turning that off. So luckily, he managed to get it sorted in a completely different way. But without him, I'd have been in a world of trouble. On the back of that as well, when you lifted the carpets to start drying them, when we put the claim in, we found we got asbestos tiles all over the floor downstairs that we didn't know about. So we managed to get those removed as well. And that entire process started from the home emergency policy. And by the way, if you claim on home emergency, it doesn't affect your no claims discount on your standard buildings and contents policy. Now, as you can see, there are a number of other things on that wheel as well, which we could keep spinning and try and land on over the next 25 minutes. But I won't go through them all today because I think you've probably had enough. But if there's anything you want to discuss, please, as I just said to Phil, don't hesitate to get in touch with us or any of the providers, because they all have the same kind of add-ons to their policies. But if you want to go through it, we're here to help. So, sales processes. How long have we got left? We've probably got about 15, no, probably about 6 or 7 minutes left. So 2 different ways to sell buildings and contents insurance. Some people like to go for the 3-quote process, which is bronze, silver and gold. So you start off with the basic policy and give them the bronze quote. Then you give them at the same time the silver quote, which you would add on something like accidental damage and home emergency or legal expenses. And then finally, you'd give them a 3rd quote, which is the gold quote, which has all of the benefits added in. So you'd have the AD, HE, legal expenses, but you'd also add in some personal possessions for them as well. And then you can do an either or close, which is probably one of my favorites. Which one do you want to go with? And what tends to happen statistically is the client will choose somewhere between silver and gold. They don't go for the bronze. Now, if you're buying from a comparison site, this is probably where you're shopping, down at the bronze quote level, because it's all based on price. But by the time the advisor had given the advice and explained what the policy means, statistically, they come here, which kind of supports the need for advice. The other way to sell is the skiing downhill option. And I have to ask, does anybody think that badge is not cute? Because I think that's possibly the cutest slide I've ever seen on a presentation. But doesn't mean anything. I just really like it. So skiing downhill is when we ask all of the questions up front. And by doing that, we know exactly what's important to the client and what they need to cover. We then clarify exactly what cover they need. You need a policy and you want a policy that does A, B, C, D, E. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Brilliant. This is the cost of that policy. Now, if that doesn't fit with their budget, we can then look at what we can take away from the policy to make it fit with what they want to spend. But it's really important that if we do that, we explain to the client what, by taking those policies or those parts of those policy away, what it means to them should they need to claim. And then we need to decide whether hitting the budget is more important than getting the right cover in place. And again, what you tend to find when you ski downhill is you will start to go up slightly on the other side again. So you go right the way from the top to the bottom, and then the client will start adding a few things in themselves, which takes it back up the other side. But If you want to go through either of those processes, either of those ideas, again, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. If you don't want to do that, after everything I've just said to you today, if you still don't want to go ahead and start talking about bills and contents with your client because you either haven't got time or you don't want to go through the knowledge learning curve, that's absolutely fine. You can refer it to one of your providers. We've got a referral option, so you can just refer it across to Paymentshield and we'll do it for you. So how do you do that? Very, very straightforward. In the Advisor Hub, there's a section called Referral. You open up Referral and you will get this little QR code. Those QR codes are specific to each individual advisor. The client can scan the QR code and fill in a date, a time, name, email address, and phone number, and one of our guys will contact them and go through their bills and content requirements with them. It's normally about a 20-25 minute call, and it'll be done at the time that your client requests it. But there's one little thing I do want to mention to you. When you open up the form, you'll see a little free type box at the bottom. This, for me, is the absolute key to success. You need to warm the lead up with your customer, with your client, because the circle of trust doesn't exist between them and Paymentshield or with any of the other providers. It sits between you and your client. So when they're speaking to us, we need to make it completely clear, and they need to understand that it's because you trust us to do this work on your behalf. So the best way to do that is by warming the call up. If you could give us some basic information, let's say, for example, they're buying a house with a bigger garden because they've got a dog and the dog needs more space. Give us the name of the dog and explain that in the free type box. They're buying a new house with an extra bedroom because they've got a kiddie on the way. If you've got any information about that, only basic stuff, not too much that it's going to scare the client and think we're stalking. But if you could give us some background information that we can open the call with. So when we say, hi, my name's Dean from Paymentshield, Phil's asked me to give you a buzz to talk about your bills and contents insurance. You booked in a slot at 1:30 today. Are you okay to talk? By the way, is Maisie looking forward to getting into the new back garden? If we can start that conversation like that, instead of let's go into your bills and contents questionnaire, we're going to get a better hit rate. And we are currently converting at around, I think it's 38% most recently, but last year, on average, we were around about 42% conversion rate, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I have to say, I'm based in the South, and the South has actually got a better hit rate than the North at the moment, because our advisors in the South have really bought into this free type box. So it's really important we actually make the most of that. Give us some soft facts. Also, if you want us to phone at 8 minutes past 2 on the Tuesday, put in, can you phone at 8 minutes past 2? And we'll do everything we can to phone them at 8 minutes past 2. Because as you can see above the box, there's 2-3 hour windows. I think that's been reduced to 2 hours now. But if you want an exact time, put that in that free type box and we'll make sure we get as close to that as we possibly can if we don't hit it exactly. So having done that, how do you know what's gone on? Well, we'll stay in touch with you. We'll tell you that you've done your referral. We'll confirm that the time has been booked. We will send you an email and we'll send your customer an email confirming the time and date of the call. If I could ask you one other thing, ask your client to put the phone number, the Paymentshield phone number, in their mobile phone. So when they call them, it comes up as a known number, not an unknown caller, because I don't know if anybody's just like me, but if I get unknown caller, I tend to delete that call and just don't answer it and it goes through to voicemail. So if we could put the phone number in their mobile phone that we're going to call them on, that will really help with that call connection level as well. Lead management, really straightforward. It's all in the Advisor Hub. You just click on referred leads. You have a separate dashboard to the business that you're writing, because just because you're referring to us doesn't mean you can't write your own GI as well. You can do both. You can pick and choose. A lot of people these days are writing their own bills and contents insurance for purchases and then referring their PT and remortgage business to Paymentshield for us to do it for them. Because even if they don't buy, it means you haven't spent time talking to your clients about it, but at least we'll give them information that they need to use if they're going to go off and buy elsewhere, or they can then review their existing policy. And trust me, that does work, because we convert at the same rate on purchase as we do on remortgage and PT business. We have exactly the same conversion rate. So that call is certainly worthwhile. But all the information that you need is at your fingertips. In the Advisor Hub, it tells you what stage it's at, what the success has been, when the policies are going live, and then you will also get all the information at renewal in 12 months' time that those policies are about to renew, to remind you to speak to your client to talk about their buildings and contents insurance, or as I said, any other policy that you want to discuss. Everything's a click through. Where it's blue on the screen, you can click on that, it will give you additional information. So it is really in depth, and there's as much knowledge there as you need about each individual referred client in exactly the same way as you'd written it yourself. Right, so that's me having banged on for 47 minutes. So I'm going to call a day to the actual webinar for me talking. What support can we give you? Well, there's a huge amount of information in the Advisor Hub if you want to go in there and take a look yourself. If you want to have a guided tour around the Advisor Hub, get in touch with us. And we've got a full team looking after Julian Harris. So you've got myself as the National Account Manager. You've got Matt Bowles as a Key Account Manager. He's out on the road doing face-to-face visits. And then we've also got 2 BDMs. I was going to say telephone BDMs, but they're not anymore. They're actually hybrids. So we've got Adam and we've got Emma. They can do things on Teams. They'll do it over the phone with you. But if you do want a face-to-face and you want them to come and see you, they're quite happy to get on the road and come down and meet you guys. So if you need any help or support, you've got 4 people you can bring it to that are dedicated to helping you as Julian Harris members. So again, I will get a flyer out to you hopefully in the next few days once it's been signed off. We're just waiting to go through compliance. Not as easy as it sounds. We'll get that out to Mohan and he can send around all of those names and contact details. So if you do need any help or support, we're there to give it to you. So thank you for letting me witter on. Hopefully it's been worthwhile. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to throw at me now? Or like I say, if you want to get back to me at a later date, please drop me an email or give me a buzz. More than happy to go through anything GI related with you.
Just one quick one.
Yes.
I think we've got about 9 providers available to us at the moment. So what would you say was unique about Paymentshield that we should come to you?
Do you know, it's really straightforward. Each one of your providers have got their own key selling points. There's very few unique selling points in the marketplace for you GI providers. And I would say exactly the same for Paymentshield. But there's one thing that we really pride ourselves on, and it's that last slide. We have got we used to be called our competitors used to call it our sales army. And we tend to go out and we will talk about GI more than we will talk about Paymentshield, because I think it's really important that people buy into the whole GI process. And if we win a market share, then fantastic. We deserve that market share. If we're not winning the market share we want, we need to be better. And we need you guys to tell us where we should improve. By the way, I never want positive feedback. Only ever give me negative feedback. We never pass positive stuff on because people get too relaxed at head office. So if there's anything we're not doing right, we need you guys to tell us. Or is there anything we can do better? We need you to tell us. But by changing our structure, sort of the middle of last year, we are now able to offer you guys and Julian House as much support as you want. We are dedicated to looking after you. So any help you need, any problems you've got, you will have access to your team. So for me, the biggest unique selling point we have is you've got a team working with you, and we are responsible for helping you improve in any way that you want to when it comes to GI.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that's okay, Phil.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Any more at the moment? I've sent everybody to sleep, Mohan. I have that
very well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your webinar. It was very informative, and yeah, thanks. And yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we're getting a new, like I say, because we've had a chat, obviously, you know, NASA's now back and Emma's moved on. So we did have a really flashy, what they call a Canva page with all our contact details on, but we still got Emma's photograph on it at the moment. So we're in the process of, I don't know if anybody knows NASA Hussain, by the way, but trying to get him to agree to having his photograph on it. He's never happy with anything. He's such a diva. None of the photographs are up to scratch for him at the moment. So as soon as we can get one he likes, we'll get that on the flyer. We'll get that across to Mohan, and you'll have all of our contact details, like I say, for myself, for Matt, Nat, for Emma, and for Adam as well. And I can't stress enough, please don't be shy. Get in touch with us. We are here to help.
Great. Thanks, Dean.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers.
And hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.